My name is Caleb Anderson, and you're listening to Jesus the Overcomer podcast. Today I have a special guest, probably my favorite one that we've had so far. It is my dad, Pastor Dylan Anderson, and I'm so grateful to have you on.
Yep, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah,
Proud of you, what you're doing here with the
thank,
podcast. So,
thank you. I want to go ahead and get started into our starter question that I'm asking all my guests. So, who or what has had the most impact on your walk with Christ?
well, a lot of people have impacted me in different ways over my journey, but I'd say probably the greatest impact thing that has impacted me the most in my Christian walk was when I got a consistent devotional and prayer life. Before that, my walk with the Lord was really up and down. But when I made that a priority, I think that's probably the thing that impacted my life the most.
Mm-hmm.
And doing it early in the morning. I mean, me and your mom still, that's what we do. First thing in the morning, we get up. I get up, brew a pot of coffee, and then when the coffee's finished brewing, we get our Bibles and we have our time alone with God before we start our day. So that's made the greatest impact on our lives, and we do that every day. So
Yeah, I remember growing up, that was something you and mom intentionally instilled in me and Daniel.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's honestly a great thing for a parent to do. Is go ahead and not just tell them that they should live a daily Bible and praying life, but actually like do it by example.
Mm-hmm.
And as you do that, I think your kids are gonna just it's gonna become a habit for them.
Right.
And I'm grateful to have that
Yeah.
that set.
Well, I'd say when y'all were little kids, we weren't very consistent
Mm-hmm.
with it. But I don't know when we finally really made that a priority. Probably about time y'all were preteens
Yeah,
or
I was gonna say
somewhere
middle
around that.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was a great answer for that question. I'm gonna go ahead and get right into our subject for today. So this one's gonna be a little different. It's not gonna be a like Q&A kind of thing where I'm asking you
Mm-hmm.
questions. Um, this one is actually gonna be our testimony
Mm-hmm.
of how God has restored our relationship.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go ahead and start by telling how it looked early on in my childhood and middle school years. You were very new in ministry when I was born and stuff,
mm-hmm.
and you went in not maybe not having the best example, so you were a little stressed out, and everything might have looked fine at church, but at home it was a lot different.
Yeah.
You took all your frustrations out on us and mom,
Mm-hmm.
and I just kind of started resenting you for it.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I was going through my own stuff. With we didn't realize at the time, but my battle was social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that also played a part with it because you didn't know how to handle that,
Right.
and you have a control issue, as you've talked about, I know, on
Mm-hmm.
stage and stuff. And with that being said, you did you didn't know how to handle it because you couldn't control it.
That's right.
And um, for that, I just saw you as a very angry man, and then um, I felt like I wasn't the son that you really wanted because I'm not athletic and I'm more on the arts side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And um, it just I know that when I was young, real young, I was going into like trying out, not trying out, but like in baseball, soccer, basketball, and that's just not my thing. That's not I'm not athletic at all. So,
Well,
um
not just athletic, you have no desire to be.
no, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to be I don't want to be doing any type of sports. Um
If it causes you to sweat, you're not really into
yeah.
it.
I mean, I've recently just started joining the gym, so
Yeah. Yeah.
but that being said, my brother was the athletic one, and um I just I just didn't feel like I was what you really wanted growing up as a son. But moving past that part and going into my early teenage years, it didn't really get better. Early on, I was still very angry at you, and we didn't have a great relationship at all.
Hmm.
Um, we didn't bond over anything. I I just really didn't really want you to be my father, to be honest.
Right.
Um, and we're still like your walk with Christ wasn't the what it's not what it is now.
Right.
When I look at you now, you're a totally different person, and your walk with Christ is really a lot better, and it's
Hmm.
a great example. But early on, it was not um, what it should be. Um, but we did change from church, and I by doing that, it that's when you did start your daily devotional life,
Hmm.
and you've had better examples of how to lead in ministry, and things started to change. I started
Hmm.
seeing things in you. By saying that, I still haven't forgiven you yet, and um, there was still some resentment, but I
Hmm.
could see that you were changing,
Right.
and I was seeing that God was working on your heart, and you were working through a lot of things that
Right.
early on you weren't working through. So I would say when I was probably about a junior in high school, that's when um I truly forgave you.
Hmm.
I think we were doing a in youth we were doing a series on forgiveness,
Hmm.
and I was really learning about like how important it is to forgive. And even though I was seeing you really were a different man than what you were in my early childhood, it was I still haven't forgiven you, and so there was still resentment, there was
Hmm.
still anger in me, and um. But I think the verse that really stuck out to me is Matthew 6:14-15.
Hmm.
For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins.
Hmm.
And that being said, like we shouldn't hold grudges. We shouldn't
Right.
um just when we see somebody changing and somebody actually putting in the work, we should forgive them. Even if they're not doing that, we still should forgive them
Hmm.
because that's what the Bible says, and that's our Father. He won't forgive you if you don't forgive other people. We should
Right.
live a life of forgiveness,
That's right.
and that's what I was learning. And I truly believe that's when things started changing with my heart
Hmm.
because it wasn't just a one-sided thing. It was we both needed some the work do the work and change.
Hmm.
And um and I started forgiving you, and we started our relationship started getting better. Um that being said, it wasn't easy. I mean, we
Hmm.
still butt heads, and I mean we're totally different in every way possible. Um but I moved away after high school,
Hmm.
and I moved for about 2 years. And you and mom, like, y'all never did anything but give me grace,
Hmm.
and y'all loved me. And that, that's when our relationship was like totally different. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I moved back, I have a totally different relationship with my dad. We have conversations,
Right.
like deep conversations. We're able to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I never thought we would be able to talk about, to be honest. Um, but we also are able to bond over things
Mm-hmm.
and do things together. And it's if you saw us when I was probably about like 8 years old, and you see us now,
Mm-hmm.
like you wouldn't probably think we're the same people because honestly we're not. We've
Yeah.
changed a lot, but our bond has changed
Right.
too.
Absolutely.
So that's the story of our relationship,
Mm-hmm. From your
from
perspective.
my perspective. So I
Right.
want you to tell your perspective.
Well, I mean, you were talking about I was young in ministry. Actually, I planted a church the year you were born, so
Hmm.
you were just a few months old. So that's how far back ministry goes with me doing ministry and being a father.
Yeah.
They were kind of simultaneous. Travel the same track. Um, you were saying that you didn't feel like I had been given uh, real healthy examples, in ministry. And I'll say, and I agree with that. And in fact, my heart is to try to help young ministers. I really want. I pray God will. Uh, he's given me some avenues to do that
Hmm.
now, but I pray even more so. Those that are young in ministry, into ministry, um, to give them some ideas, some practical ways to balance family and ministry. I'd been told things, but no practical ways of doing it. Be given things like you put your family before the ministry, but nobody would tell you how to walk that out.
Hmm.
There are practical ways to do it. You know what I mean? So the I would say some of the best examples I was given was later on in life when I was with the Assemblies of God, and I will say their training a lot of times they did a lot of things in the sense of really discussing with ministers how do you keep that balance in life. And so many times we were just um, just told to put your family first, but then I'd been given unhealthy things, almost like you know. Well, anytime anybody called, I mean, I'd actually been told that, you've got to be there for your people and this kind of stuff. Well, I'm only one person,
Hmm.
and if you don't know how to draw any kind of boundaries, you're just going to get stressed out, burned out. You're not going to have anything left for your family. The other side of things is as you said, had a problem with control. I'm a control freak. God's helping me with that more and more.
Hmm.
Um, that has led to um, my own struggles with anxiety
Yeah.
because when you have all these responsibilities and you're trying to control everything and you find out you're not in control, what does it do? It just becomes unbearable. You get anxious. In fact, I believe I was actually dealing with a lot of that. I didn't have the label of anxiety back when I was early on in the ministry and parenting. I think that was part of it uh, that was manifesting itself even in our relationship. I mean, part of the stress, being stressed out, and just and how I reacted. A lot of times, it was just being overwhelmed and feeling extremely anxious. Um, my idea, even as a parent, I just had these ideas that uh, of just kind of the order and the structure things should be in. And blessed with two boys, but two very um, independent um, young men that never they were not compliant. They you or your brother, um, you know. sometimes I think y'all were just absolutely defiant. Y'all like to push my buttons. Almost felt like when I. So, I, and I'll just give an example. Early on, I mean, your social anxiety, whatever I don't understand it all, but I mean, this was basically something you were just about almost born with.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go back to when you were a toddler, and my idea was, our children, now if they're sick or something, we may have them sleep in the bed, but they're not going to be in. They're going to have their own bedroom. You're going to stay in your own bed. Well, you would have what I now know is like night terrors. And I just thought you just being a stubborn child and didn't want to be at sleep. But I mean, basically, you were um, almost like sleepwalking. But I mean, just acting out. I mean, you weren't consciously there. And Suzanne would try to tell me that, but I'm like, no, he just didn't want to be in his bed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'd whip your tail, put you back in bed, and I mean, it just made things worse.
Yeah.
For one, I mean, sometimes when you would come to, you didn't realize what was going on. Um, it's just, I had my ideas of things, and I would try to control it, and it didn't work out well at all. So I
Right.
mean, it goes back to early childhood and not understanding, your own struggles. The other thing you talked about is the fact that we didn't have things in common. Um, but my whole thing is struggling as a dad to try to find common ground, and that was a real battle. We no matter anything I would, I was like, I just couldn't find a place to relate.
Yeah.
With Daniel it was a lot easier. Like you say, outdoors and sports and stuff. He was down with all that. You didn't like any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh my goodness, we had some interesting events like you locking yourself in the bathroom at baseball. Baseball games and stuff because you didn't want to play. I'm like,
Yeah.
so I'm screaming at you like, "Hey, get out of the bathroom! I signed you up for this baseball game." It was interesting, but as life went on, I mean, we went. It was one of those things. I think the devotional life was key to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I was, if I'd prayed more, and I'm not talking about, because sometimes I've even heard those things too, because I'd feel guilty about that. I mean, that's the work ethic side of ministry. I always felt like, well, if I did more, if I prayed more, things would be going better in ministry. It was all me driven,
Right.
and now Lord's helping me to understand. I just need to do what I can do, leave the results to God. Sometimes that's easier said than done, but when you're in constant communication with God, and you believe you've done, you're listening to God, and you're doing what you're obedient to what He asks you to do. Um, there's nothing more to do than you just leave the results to Him.
Right.
But the same thing in parenting, and I wasn't doing that. I was trying to figure everything out. I was um, uh, trying to find common ground instead of, well, God, you formed this child. You know this child. You know what he needs. Help me to meet this child's needs and just be there for him. So it was difficult. But as things went on, like you say, I mean, we made some changes in churches and those kind of things, and I received some healing. And at that same time, I started developing a more of a steady devotional life intentionally. Things at home got better because, like I said, I mean, you brought it up. I mean, there's no doubt. Me and my wife, we've shared with others that um, first part of our marriage um, was not textbook what you want to see as a Christian home. I mean, it was just a lot of stress, a lot of you know. Well, when you're stressed out and you're burned out, what you tend to do is you take it out on the ones you love the most.
Mm-hmm.
You've held it together all day long, and then when you get home, you don't have anything left for your family. And so, uh, you boys and Suzanne um, got a lot of my frustration, a lot of my anger in those days. But I'll say one thing is those things got healthier, and we began to see um, what you enjoyed. All of a sudden, those things began to become a little more clear. You talking about the artsy side, Well, I mean, for one, I didn't know. I'm like, all I knew is what you didn't like,
Yeah.
you know. So, fine arts, you started participating, doing drama stuff, doing artwork, and so I mean, we tried to get you in art classes and supported you when you traveled to compete in those kind of things, and really, that's where we started finding some ground where we could say, we're proud of what you're doing, and and we're getting behind what God has put in your heart. But I know you experienced your own hurts and things uh, apart from what we're talking about with myself. You'd forgive me. You said about junior year of high school, but when you moved away, it wasn't just moving away from us. I know at that point you had kind of moved away from the direction God had you in,
Mm-hmm.
and how you were raised, and but I think that was a real pivotal point that God allowed us. Okay, you talk about a prodigal child or a prodigal son. People talk about that. Well, I mean, you were for a short period of time, and I'll be honest with you, there were some folks that gave us some bad advice about that. Well, I thank God that we had matured to the place. Like, no, we'll just I'll just share. I mean, there were some that told us to, um, well, just let him go his way. You distance yourself. You just pray for him from a distance. Like, no,
I'll
I'm
be
a,
honest. I would never came back if
exactly
that was um that was the case because I would have just felt more pain
right.
than anything.
Well, like we'd rejected you,
Right.
Um, so I mean, I think me and your mom both were very clear on that, and actually heard from God on that, and found ways to go visit at times, um, speak into your life when God told us to speak. We didn't we didn't shake our finger in judgment at you every time we
Mhm.
saw you, but if God gave us a word, we'd give it to you,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it was from your mother on that side. But but the thing was, I feel like we were, for the first time in life, as far as a parent, even though we're talking about an adult child. Let's see, were you 18 when you moved
I
away?
was 19.
19.
Mm-hmm.
So for 2 years, but we would go visit you. We'd go out to eat. We'd go, spend time with you, and just continue to love on you. And and from that, God brought us back together,
Yeah.
and God brought you not just back home to where we physically live, but back home to Christ, And
That's
now,
right.
you're doing ministry, and we've got another connection, like you say. I mean,
Right.
I feel like, I mean, I told you in high school, I felt like God had a call on your life. I mean, and it may not be uh, regular pulpit ministry or whatever. This may be it. We don't know where God's going to carry this.
Right.
But I know you have a call on your life. I'd seen that through your high school years. Um, well, just to discuss another thing, it wasn't just your um, social anxiety, but also the fact that you had basically a learning disability and,
Mm-hmm.
structure, and struggled with reading and writing.
Yep.
And once again, the control freak side of me, just I couldn't control it. I couldn't. as much as we went over and over and over these things, a lot of times it ended badly. Doing
Mm-hmm.
homework, doing assignments,
Yeah.
you know, it didn't end very well,
Yeah.
you know. So that was another struggle. That was something I couldn't control, but just how when you really surrender it to God, how God can turn things around. I tried to change things, and I know the miracle of basically you've given your testimony before, but the miracle of you were entering into high school and basically reading on a third grade level,
Yep.
and then for whatever reason, I think it's the hand of God. Um, all of a sudden, your reading began to you began to understand to be able to read, but not just your reading, your ability to read, but also your reading comprehension. The whole thing, it's just like God just turned it around just like that. And I think and not to say God doesn't always perform a miracle like that, but the fact is when I let loose of control, um, and let God do what only He could do,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we began to see the results, and the fruit of that was right there to begin with when you started a Christian club in at your high school, which I was very proud of you for. What grade was that?
That was my junior year as well.
Junior year.
And see, you're talking about you. I was in high school. You saw, started seeing my call. Well, the summer before my junior year was actually when I actually realized my calling, because that's when God spoke to me about opening that Christian club. But the funny thing with that is, starting high school was a third grade reading level, and then by my junior year, I was making lessons
Exactly.
and um, understanding the Bible and being able to speak to not just students but teachers.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I mean, that's where God really started working with my calling, because I mean, who would ever thought that you would have a classroom full of teachers on a Tuesday morning
Mhm.
before school, and they're giving you all these serious prayer requests and
Mhm.
being so vulnerable, and you're just a 11th grader. Like
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's not a normal thing, but that, and I also think that's where we did bond over some things,
Mhm.
because I was going to you for
Yeah. How to
some
develop.
advice.
Yeah. How to develop those lessons and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things where I was watching, which would totally amazed me because, like we're saying, you couldn't. You talking about school papers and stuff. You couldn't formulate one sentence that was grammatically correct,
Mhm.
and you went from that to your junior year to basically. I mean, they were short sermons. You weren't,
Right.
but 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 having different Bible text. And I mean, you were doing this on your own and finding biblical references that supported your text and having 3 points and all these kind of things. I'm just like, how does a kid who couldn't formulate one sentence to now you're able to do this? And there were adults. I mean, I was amazed because I know you were in your Bible. There were adults and people my age that I know that couldn't do that,
Mhm.
and you were doing that as a junior when I knew you know just a few couple years prior, you know you couldn't have you would have struggled just reading one sentence in your Bible.
Right.
So I mean it's just amazing where God brought things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it was just God. I mean, that wasn't out of my own power. That was
Oh yeah.
all God. I
Hmm.
mean, he turned things around like so fast.
And what I'm just grateful for is just like you say. I mean, God is the redeemer of relationships. He saves our soul, and he redeems our relationship with Him.
Mhm.
But then he redeems relationships around us,
Right.
because I thank God that your mom didn't give up on our marriage. Um, because I mean things were rocky there for quite some time, but now we've got a very strong marriage, and I mean, I can't imagine doing life without her. And we do life together. We run a business together. We do
Hmm.
ministry together. We do family together. You know, it's um, it's a joint effort like it's supposed to be.
Right.
But before, I was always trying to control everything, and everybody needs to get on board with the plan that I've got.
Right.
And that doesn't, instead of we're all in this together, you know what I mean? And everybody has something to contribute. I mean, I really would enter into everything. Like, okay, I've got this figured out, and y'all just got to get on board with what I've got figured out.
Right. I mean,
And so that was that.
um,
Who cares what your idea is or your mom's idea? I've got it figured out.
right. But going back to saying about how God has healed your marriage too,
Yeah.
um, there was a part of me that wanted y'all to get a divorce and during that time
Mm,
because I could say everybody was miserable. Like
right.
none of us were happy. And every
Including me.
everything was falling apart, and we're angry all the time. And I was really wanting y'all to get a divorce, and I didn't want to have anything to do with you.
Mm,
But because God did heal y'all marriage, it's a great example for me and Daniel because
mm-hmm.
I mean, when times get hard, that's a lot of people will be like, I'm just gonna call it quits. I'm not gonna work through things.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, America's divorce population has gone way up
Oh yeah.
over the years, and that's why because people aren't putting God in the center of
Mm-hmm.
your marriages, and then they're not trying to fix their marriages, and seeing y'all because it wasn't always perfect. It was hard for probably about 5 years in y'all's marriage. That seeing that, and
It went longer than that, but
well, I think me actually realizing it was probably
oh
about
yeah,
five
yeah.
years.
Gotcha.
And but seeing that example and seeing how good y'all marriage is now is
Right.
it's it's a great example for us.
We've been married 25, going on 26 years. I'd probably say we struggled for about 10 years,
Yeah.
which is a long time, you know. I mean, we had some good times through that. It's not to say it was all bad, but uh, yeah, I hate that it took that long for me to get the realization of I needed to, um, well, surrender things to God
Mm,
and well, some of it too. Like I say, about saying everybody need to get on board with my plan, but some of it was just the fact of just putting too much of a burden on myself.
mm-hmm.
Like I say, uh, and I think that I think that is a large part of why so many people drop out of the ministry across the United States. They see everything as uh, is their responsibility to grow the church, their responsibility to make sure families are healed and all these things. And we can't save a soul. We can't. I can't save somebody else's marriage. I can give them advice, point them to Jesus, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And the more I get to realizing that, the more peace I have. You know, they've got to grab hold of godly wisdom and biblical advice, and then they got to run with it. I
That's
mean, I
right.
can't be responsible for that. And sometimes the results don't look like we want it. Everybody wants to be in the middle of revival. Everybody wants to see great things happening. But I think I measured myself according to um, uh, what I saw around me.
Mm-hmm.
The results, and I'm not responsible for the results.
Right.
I'm just responsible for following the call. And and the same thing with ministry. I think your mom actually, because, and I know she said this to me. There was a time when, okay, I'd gone in ministry, and we were out of ministry for a while, and that's when actually we got healthy, and I wanted to get back into ministry more, and she told me she was not very excited about it because she had the bad taste in her mouth from where things were, and I I assured her, and I'm glad she was willing to take the steps with me I assured her it's not going to be the same as it was before, and it hasn't been. It's been a blessing to be able to walk hand in hand with your mom doing ministry together, and she's got a lot to contribute. And I'll share this. I think there are some too that look at the one that's out front, and they think they're the ones that's got the calling on their life, and they've got the one they're the ones that can contribute. But I knew Suzanne's always had so much to offer, and but I don't think a lot of people saw that because she was kind of a behind the scenes kind of person. But God's really she's got gifts, and she's got things. I couldn't do what I do without her.
Right.
And God partners people together like that, So
yeah,
I hope I'm not rambling too much.
No,
Anyway.
I think it's all really great because it does all go with our story, and y'all's marriage was a big part of our story, and the ministry aspect was also a big part. I actually remember when you wanted to start getting back into ministry, and Mom did talk to me. She was like, "Your dad's talking about this. I'll be praying and everything." And I'm gonna be honest, like I also had concerns because it was really hard. I remember like on Sunday mornings we'll be literally screaming at each other on the ride to church, but then we get
pulled into the parking lot. What are you talking about?
and we'll get out of the car and we're supposed to act like everything was okay and we were great, and things weren't. But now it's totally different. But I think that's also a good reminder for other people because we're not the only one that's the case. Like, parents might be fussing at their kids on the way to church, but that doesn't really define how God sees y'all. I mean, you can always work on that and stuff, but I mean, kids can be a headache. I know we were strong willed and we gave y'all a run for your money, but but I mean, it's a lot better now. And, and I'm really grateful that God has healed our relationship.
Yep.
I do want to talk about how important it is to forgive. Because even though me and you we have a father son relationship, but there's all these relationships that you should forgive. If somebody does you wrong, you should forgive them.
Right.
I know I said something about like I saw you changing, and that's when I started forgiving you. But that's not the case for everybody. Some people will never see the change in the other person, but you still need to forgive them.
That's right.
It's going to relieve you
that's
pain, and you will see blessings because of it.
Yeah. Well, that's when we allow the peace of God to come into our hearts. Because by holding on to unforgiveness and bitterness, I mean, it's just killing us from the inside. So by forgiving, even for somebody who's not sorry for what they've done, I mean, it's more for our benefit than theirs,
Right.
A lot of times they may not even acknowledge that they've got anything to be forgiven for, but we can't hold on to hurts.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, you can't carry that pain around and then expect to reap joy.
Oh yeah.
Because it's not going to come. You're going to be angry. You're going to be hurt. You're going to not show the joy of Christ because you have all of this burden on you. So it is important to forgive, and yeah, I mean, I don't really think I have anything else to say to you.
I don't. I think that about covers it, man. Love you, son.
I love you. I'm glad that you were able to come on. I'm glad we were able to have this conversation.
Right.
And I'm excited to see what God's going to take it.
Yep. I hope it'll help somebody.
Thank you for tuning in to Jesus the Overcomer podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share it to your friends. See you next time.